Hi and welcome. I'm Midnight Truth, and it's so nice to have you here tonight. Wherever you are right now, whether you're in bed, lying on the couch, or just looking for a quiet moment, I want you to know this time is for you. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel the way the days start to fade. Let your mind settle, let your body relax, and let yourself simply be. There's no rush, no pressure, just this calm, quiet moment, if you like. You can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Maybe it's a cozy room with soft, warm lighting, or maybe it's under a starry sky, with a gentle breeze brushing against you. Wherever you feel safe and calm, let yourself drift there. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time is it there? Tonight's story is gentle and soothing, perfect to carry you into a deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. I should have known better. That's what I keep telling myself. Maybe if I had listened, if I had paid attention to the warnings, I wouldn't be sitting here now, shaking, unable to sleep, waiting for something to come for me. But I didn't listen. I never do. It started with the house. The listing had seemed too good to be true. A spacious, old Victorian on the outskirts of a quiet town, renting for less than half the market price. When I first saw the pictures, something about it called to me. Maybe it was the way the wraparound porch sagged just slightly, like an old man resting after a long day, or the way the tall windows reflected the sky in a way that made the house look alive. After the divorce, I needed a change, a place where no one knew me, where I wasn't the guy who had lost everything. I wanted silence, space to think. And that's exactly what Ashford, a town I had never heard of, seemed to offer. The drive there was uneventful, long highways turning into winding roads, the landscape growing wilder the closer I got. The town itself was small, frozen in time. A single gas station, a few brick storefronts, a diner with a faded neon sign that simply read, "Eats." People moved slow, eyes following my car as I passed, their expressions unreadable. By the time I pulled up to the house, the sky had dimmed to a deep purple. There it stood, at the very end of a lonely road, its presence towering and solemn. The paint was chipped, the wood darkened with age, but it had a kind of worn-out charm. Mrs. Holloway, the real estate agent, was waiting on the porch, a thin woman with sharp eyes. She tapped the keys against her palm as I stepped out of the car. "You made good time," she said, glancing at the house like it might interrupt her at any moment. "Yeah, not much traffic." She nodded but didn't smile. "It's a fine house. Sturdy. Been standing over 100 years now." I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. Just held out the keys. "Anything I should know?" I asked, half joking. "Roof about a cave-in? Pipes burst in winter?" She hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Old houses have their quirks," she said carefully. "Creaks, drafts, the usual. Just takes some getting used to." Something about her tone made me pause. "And the last tenant? They just moved out." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Something like that." I didn't push. I should have. Instead, I took the keys and thanked her. She didn't step inside with me, just turned and walked down the porch steps, pausing only to say, "Have a good night." Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else. Something faint, like the lingering scent of old flowers, long since dried up. The wooden floors creaked beneath my shoes, each step echoing slightly, as if the house was listening. The furniture was all still there, covered in white sheets. The previous tenant hadn't bothered to take much with them. The living room had an old fireplace, its bricks blackened with years of use. A single rocking chair sat facing it, as though someone had been waiting for fire to be lit again. I explored the rest of the house, flipping light switches, testing faucets. Everything worked fine, though the plumbing groaned like an old man stretching after a long nap. The kitchen was small but functional, the cabinets lined with yellow wallpaper. A single bulb flickered slightly overhead. Upstairs, the hallway was long and narrow, leading to 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. The master bedroom was mine now, complete with a large bay window overlooking the empty street. The bed frame was old, the mattress thin, but I didn't care. That night, as I lay under unfamiliar blankets, the house whispered around me. The walls popped, the wooden beams settled with long, aching sighs. Normal sounds, I told myself. Then I heard the footsteps. Soft, careful, like someone was walking just outside my door. I sat up, my pulse suddenly hammering. The hallway beyond the door was dark. I listened, holding my breath. Nothing, just the house settling. I laid back down, forcing myself to relax. It was just my imagination. But as sleep finally pulled me under, I swore I heard something else. A voice, a whisper, welcome home. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The strange dreams, if they were dreams, lingered just beneath the surface of my thoughts, slipping away the moment I tried to recall them. All I knew was that something had felt wrong. I pushed the feeling aside and forced myself out of bed. Dust motes floated in the slanted morning light pouring through the bay window. The air in the room was cold, far colder than it should have been for early autumn. The old radiator against the wall stood silent, its iron body icy to the touch. I made a mental note to check the heating later and headed downstairs. The house was quiet now, no more strange noises, no more whispers. In the light of day, it almost felt normal. Almost. I set to work unpacking, carrying boxes from my car, stacking them in the living room. As I was setting down a particularly heavy box, I caught movement from the corner of my eye, a figure, outside the window. I turned quickly, my heart stuttering. But there was nothing. The street was empty. The sidewalk stretched into the distance, lined with gnarled trees that swayed slightly in the wind. Just my imagination, shaking off the uneasy feeling. I grabbed a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, the sky a perfect blue. Across the street, a woman stood watering her plants. She was older, maybe late 60s. Her gray hair pulled into a loose bun. She noticed me and lifted a hand in greeting. I hesitated, then waved back. She set her watering can down and walked over, her shoes clicking softly against the pavement. Up close, her eyes were sharp and curious, her face lined but kind. "You're the new tenant," she said, not a question. I nodded. "That obvious?" She smiled slightly. "We don't get many newcomers, especially not in that house." Something about the way she said that house made my stomach tighten. "You know it well?" I asked. She glanced at the porch, her gaze lingering on the front door. "Lived across the street for 30 years. Seen plenty of people come and go. None of them stayed long." I frowned. "Why?" She shrugged, but there was something careful about it. "People get spooked, I suppose. Old houses have history. Some folks can't handle it." I wanted to press further, but she changed the subject. "I'm Eleanor, by the way." I shook her hand. "Daniel. Well, Daniel. If you need anything, I'm just across the way. But if I were you, I'd keep a light on at night." She turned and walked back to her house without another word. Her warning stayed with me throughout the day. I told myself it was just small-town superstition, just the way people talked in places like this. But something about the way she had looked at the house, like she was afraid of it, unsettled me more than I cared to admit. By evening, I had unpacked most of my things. The house looked more like mine now, though there were still traces of the previous tenant. A dusty bookshelf filled with old, forgotten paperbacks. A wooden rocking chair in the corner that I hadn't touched, but somehow felt as though it had moved slightly since the morning. I tried not to think about that. As the sun dipped below the trees, the house grew cold again. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that makes the air feel heavier. I checked the thermostat. Still broken. I sighed and decided to turn in early, but as I climbed the stairs, I stopped. The door at the end of the hallway, the one to the smallest bedroom, was open. I was sure I had left it closed. A trick of the air, I told myself. Houses settle, doors shift. Still, I walked over and pushed it shut. The latch clicked into place, solid and firm. I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing. Satisfied, I turned and headed to my room. That night, I barely slept. At first, it was the usual noises, the creaks, the groans, the occasional soft pop of wood shifting in the walls. Normal, expected sounds. Then, sometime after midnight, something changed. A rhythmic creaking, slow and deliberate. The sound of a chair rocking back and forth. My breath caught. The rocking chair. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself it was my imagination. But then came the footsteps. Soft, barefoot, moving outside my door. I lay completely still, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped. And then, a whisper. So close it could have been right beside me. Let me in. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. For what felt like hours, I lay there, heart hammering in my chest. And then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. The air in the room warmed. The house went still. When I finally gathered the courage to sit up, the clock read 3:07 a.m. I told myself it had been a dream, a trick of exhaustion. But when I got up to check the hallway, my door was unlocked. And the door at the end of the hall, it was wide open. Morning arrived like a fragile thing. The soft light seeping through the curtains doing little to chase away the lingering unease from the night before. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped my coffee mug, staring blankly at the swirling black liquid inside. I hadn't dreamed it. I knew that much. The footsteps, the whisper, the open door. I hadn't imagined it. I forced myself to shake it off, push away the growing paranoia creeping into my mind. It was an old house. It creaked and groaned with age. Maybe I had left the door open and just forgotten. Maybe I had been so exhausted from moving that I was half asleep, hearing things that weren't really there. But deep down, I didn't believe any of that. Determined not to let fear get the best of me, I decided to focus on settling in. The house still smelled faintly of dust and something older, something stale. The previous tenant had left behind a few things, mostly junk. Old newspapers, cracked picture frames, a few moth-eaten blankets stuffed into the hall closet. As I sorted through them, I came across a small wooden box tucked away at the back of the closet's top shelf. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, the edges worn as if it had been handled many times over the years. Curious, I pulled it down and carried it to the kitchen table. The latch was rusted but still functional. It clicked open with a soft snap. Inside was a bundle of yellowed papers, folded neatly. A journal. My breath hitched as I unfolded the first page, my eyes scanning the messy scrawl. October 14th, 1997. It started with the footsteps. My heart pounded. I kept reading. They came at night, always past midnight. Slow at first, then faster. The whispering followed. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was the wind or the pipes, but I know better now. There's something in this house, something watching. A shiver ran down my spine. Flipping to the pages, I found more of the same. Frantic scrawls detailing sleepless nights, strange noises, shadows that move when they shouldn't. The further I read, the more erratic the handwriting became, like whoever had written this had been coming apart at the seams. November 2 ND. I locked the door. It didn't matter. It never does. Asterisk, asterisk. Last night, it sat on the bed. I felt it. The weight. The breath. Asterisk, asterisk. It whispered my name. I slammed the journal shut, my pulse thundering in my ears. This was a joke. It had to be. Some old tenant trying to scare the next person who moved in. That was the only logical explanation. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that curled around my chest like cold fingers. I spent the rest of the day trying to keep myself busy, cleaning, unpacking, rearranging furniture. Anything to keep my mind off what I had read. By the time night fell, I was exhausted but dreading sleep. I left the hallway light on. I locked my bedroom door. And for the first time in years, I slept with the blankets pulled up to my chin, like a child afraid of the dark. But the house didn't care about locked doors. I woke to the sound of something breathing, not the soft, even breaths of someone asleep. No, this was different, ragged, deep, like something struggling to inhale. My stomach twisted as I cracked my eyes open, barely daring to move. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the hallway light seeping in from under the door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The breathing grew closer. Slow, dragging breaths, pulling at the air as though whatever was had just crawled up from the depths of something rotten. My fingers curled into the sheets, my pulse hammering in my throat. And then the mattress dipped. A cold, heavy weight settled at the edge of the bed. I wanted to turn my head to see what was sitting there, but I couldn't because I knew, deep in my bones and the way my skin prickled with something ancient and primal that I did not want to see. It was watching me. I could feel it. The pressure on the mattress shifted, the weight inching closer. The whisper came again, impossibly close. A voice I didn't recognize, but somehow knew had been whispering to me my whole life. "You let me in." A sob caught in my throat. The mattress lifted. The room fell silent. It was gone. I lay there for hours, too afraid to move, waiting for the sun to rise. When morning finally came, I found the journal again, flipping through the pages until my hands trembled. I stopped at the last entry, the final words written in jagged, frantic strokes. There is no escaping it. No matter where you go, it will follow. It doesn't need permission. It was always here. A shadow passed across the window. Outside, Eleanor stood on the sidewalk, staring up at my house. Her expression was grim, and somehow I knew she had seen this before. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. I stood at the window, staring down at Eleanor. She hadn't moved. Her eyes remained fixed on my house, her face unreadable. A creeping dread curled in my stomach. I wasn't ready to face her, not yet. I needed time to process what had happened last night, to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that the weight on my bed, the whisper, the breathing, none of it had been real. But deep down I knew it had been real. Eleanor must have sensed me watching, because her head tilted slightly, her gaze snapping up to meet mine. A chill ran through me. I stepped back, letting the curtain fall. I needed to get out of the house, even if just for a little while. After throwing on some clothes, I grabbed my keys and headed outside. Eleanor was still there, standing rigidly at the end of my driveway. Her eyes flicked over me, scanning my face as if searching for something. "You didn't sleep, did you?" Her voice was quiet, matter of fact. I hesitated. "What makes you say that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at my house, her expression darkening. "You heard it, didn't you?" A cold knot formed in my stomach. I forced a laugh, though it came out weak. "Heard what?" She sighed, folding her arms. "You don't have to pretend. I know what that place does to people." My mouth went dry. "What happened here?" Eleanor didn't speak right away. She stared at the house for a long time, as if trying to decide how much to tell me. Finally, she exhaled. "There have been others before you," she said. "Some left within days. Others stuck it out longer. None of them stayed." A cold wind blew through the street, rustling the brittle autumn leaves at our feet. "Why?" I asked. She hesitated again, then looked me dead in the eye. "Because the house doesn't want them to." A sharp pang of unease rippled through me. "That's ridiculous. It's just a house." Eleanor shook her head. "No, it isn't." I swallowed, suddenly feeling small beneath her unwavering stare. "Did you ever meet them?" I asked. "The people who lived here before me?" Eleanor's face darkened. "One of them, he lasted 6 months. Said he was going to fight it, that he wouldn't let it scare him." She took a slow breath. "Then one night, he ran out of the house barefoot in the snow, screaming that something was inside his walls." I stiffened. "What happened to him?" She looked away. "No one knows. He never came back." A heavy silence stretched between us. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the distant sound of chimes clinking against each other. I didn't want to believe her, but I did. Something had happened to the people before me. Something had happened last night, and I had the sinking feeling that it was only the beginning. Eleanor's gaze drifted to my hands. "You found the journal, didn't you?" I froze. "How did you know about that?" "I've seen it before," she murmured. "Someone always finds it." A lump formed in my throat. What happened to the person who wrote it? Eleanor hesitated. He left in the middle of the night. Or at least, that's what people think. I frowned. What do you mean? She chewed the inside of her cheek, as if weighing whether or not to tell me. The landlord said he packed up and left. But her voice dropped lower. Some people say they still hear him. A shiver crawled down my spine. What? Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. Inside the house. At night, his footsteps. I felt an icy weight settle in my chest. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was crazy, that ghosts weren't real. But I couldn't, because I had heard them too. Eleanor gave me a long, searching look. You should leave before it gets worse. I swallowed hard. And if I don't, her eyes darkened. Then it will make you stay. The words sent a sharp, electric chill through my body. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Eleanor turned and walked away, her figure disappearing down the street. I stood there for a long time, my fingers gripping my keys so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Then, slowly, I turned and looked back at the house. The windows stared back, dark and empty. A shudder ran through me. It was waiting, and deep down I knew I had already stayed too long. The house felt different when I stepped back inside. The air was heavier, as if the walls had been holding their breath while I was gone, only to exhale the moment I crossed the threshold. The wooden floor groaned beneath my weight, but it wasn't the usual settling sound. It was deeper, almost reluctant, like it didn't want me here. I locked the door behind me, pressing my back against it as I exhaled. Eleanor's words clung to me like cobwebs. You should leave before it gets worse. But I had no place to go. I had poured my savings into this house, desperate for a fresh start. After the divorce, after losing everything that once felt stable, this was supposed to be my sanctuary, my new beginning. Now it felt like a trap. I ran my fingers through my hair and forced myself to move. The house wasn't haunted. It was old, creaky, and full of history, but nothing more. Whatever I'd experienced last night had to have an explanation. Exhaustion, stress, maybe even sleep paralysis. That was a thing, right? People waking up, feeling like something was holding them down. Yes, that had to be it. But as I walked through the dim hallway toward the living room, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was watching me. Not from the windows, not from the corners, from the walls. I stopped mid-step, my breath catching in my throat. The walls. Eleanor's voice whispered in my head. He ran out of the house barefoot in the snow, screaming that something was inside his walls. A chill skittered down my spine. I shook the thought away and stepped into the living room. The journal still sat on the coffee table where I had left it, its worn leather cover looking more ominous now in the dull afternoon light. I hesitated before picking it up, running my fingers over the faded initials on the cover. GR. I flipped it open, scanning the cramped, hurried writing. Asterisk January 14th. It started with the whispers. I thought I was losing my mind, but then I saw it. The shadow. It knows I see it. And now it won't stop watching me. Asterisk. A lump formed in my throat. I turned the page. The next entry was even more frantic. Asterisk January 16th. The footsteps are getting louder. At first, I thought it was the pipes, but pipes don't walk. They don't pace outside my bedroom door. They don't breathe. Asterisk. I shuddered, flipping another page. Asterisk January 18th. It's in the walls. I hear it moving when the house is quiet. Scraping, crawling, whispering. Asterisk. The words were smudged, as if the writer's hand had been shaking. Asterisk January 19th. It wants me to stay. It doesn't like when I leave. Last night, I woke up and the bedroom door was locked from the outside. I didn't lock it. I don't think I can leave. Asterisk. I slammed the journal shut, my pulse hammering against my ribs. No, this was paranoia. Someone had just played a trick, left this here to scare people like me. That's all it was. I stood, gripping the journal in my hands, ready to toss it in the nearest drawer and forget about it. And then I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak from upstairs. I froze. Another creak, a footstep. I wasn't alone. Every nerve in my body went rigid. My hands clenched around the journal. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe it was the wind shifting the wood. Maybe I was losing my mind. Or maybe someone was up there. I moved slowly, my sock feet silent against the floor. The stairs loomed ahead, dark and yawning. I hesitated at the base, straining to listen. Silence. And then, a whisper. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a word. Not really. Just the faintest sound, barely audible. But it came from the top of the stairs. I swallowed hard, gripping the railing as I forced myself up one step at a time. It would groan beneath me, but I barely noticed. My heart was pounding too loudly in my ears. I reached the landing. The hallway stretched before me. The bedroom doors shut. The air thick with something I couldn't name. I waited. Silence. I took another step forward. The closet door at the end of the hall creaked open. A sharp, icy dread flooded my body. My breath caught in my throat. The door hadn't been opened before. I could see nothing but darkness beyond it. No shape, no movement. But I knew something was inside, watching, waiting, and then slowly the door began to close. Not slamming, not jerking, just gently swinging shut, like someone on the other side was pushing it. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran. I stumbled down the stairs, nearly losing my footing as I hit the last step. My breath came in ragged gasps, my chest tightening with pressure that felt unnatural, almost suffocating. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. The moment I reached the living room, I spun around, expecting, no, dreading, to see something standing at the top of the stairs. A shadow, a figure, anything, but there was nothing. Only the closet door at the end of the hallway, now completely shut. I swallowed, trying to calm the erratic rhythm of my heart. My hands trembled as I gripped the journal tighter, my fingers pressing into the worn leather like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. This wasn't normal. This wasn't in my head. I had seen the door move, and worse, I had heard something. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think. What was I supposed to do? Call the police and tell them my closet door moved on its own? That I heard whispers? They'd either think I was messing with them or that I was having some kind of breakdown. Neither option would help me. I needed proof. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, switched on the camera, and pointed it up the stairs. The screen trembled slightly in my grasp. I hit record and zoomed in on the closet door. Nothing moved. The house was silent. I took a cautious step forward. My pulse roared in my ears. Another step. Still nothing. My breathing steadied just enough for me to push forward, one foot in front of the other, creeping toward the staircase like an idiot in a horror movie. I reached the base of the stairs and hesitated. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, to run, to get out. But I had to know. I lifted my phone higher and took another step, and then my screen went black. No warning, no flicker, just complete darkness. My breath caught in my throat. I tapped the screen, pressed the buttons, but nothing happened. My phone was fully charged. There was no reason for it to shut off like that. A chill spread through my spine. Then, from upstairs, a whisper, low, distant, but unmistakable. I wasn't alone. Something was up there. My legs locked, my body frozen between fight and flight. Every muscle screamed at me to move, but I couldn't. I was trapped in place by something stronger than fear. And then, the closet door creaked open again. This time, it didn't stop. It swung open wider, the darkness inside stretching, yawning, as if inviting me in. And then I saw it. A shadow, shifting, moving, no, crawling out from the closet. My vision blurred with terror. It was low to the ground, its movements unnatural, jerky, like something trying to mimic how a person might move, but failing horribly. Its limbs were too long, its body hunched, its fingers scraping the wooden floor as it crept forward. A sound escaped my throat, half a gasp, half a whimper. My body finally broke free from its paralysis, and I turned on my heel, bolting toward the door. I reached for the handle, and it didn't move. Locked. I twisted and yanked, my palms slick with sweat. The air behind me grew colder. I felt it before I saw it. Something was right there. A presence. A weight in the air. A whisper so close to my ear I could feel the breath of it. I squeezed my eyes shut, muscles shaking. Then, just as suddenly as it came, it was gone. The weight lifted. The air lightened. The silence returned. My body sagged against the door, every inch of me trembling. I forced myself to turn around. The staircase was empty. The closet door was closed. No shadow, no sound, as if nothing had happened. My heart hammered against my ribs. I needed to get out. Now, screw the house. Screw the money I had spent. I wasn't staying another night. I grabbed my car keys from the table and ran. I burst the front door, gasping for air like I had been drowning. The night was cold, the wind slicing against my skin, but I barely felt it. My heart was hammering. My fingers numb as I fumbled to unlock my car. My mind screamed at me to go, to get the hell away from that house. I slid into the driver's seat and jammed the key into the ignition. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn it. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then died. I twisted the key again. Click. Nothing. A chill crawled over my skin. No, this wasn't happening. I slammed my hand against the dashboard, cursing under my breath. My car had never had issues before. There was no reason it shouldn't be starting, unless I didn't want to finish that thought. I reached for my phone to call for help, but when I pressed the power button, the screen remained black, just like inside the house. My breath hitched. Something wasn't letting me leave. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to think. Maybe I could run. I wasn't far from town. If I just kept moving, I could... A tap, soft, subtle, right against my car window. I went completely still. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a tree branch. It was deliberate, slowly, as if moving too fast would shatter the fragile barrier between me and whatever was out there. I turned my head toward the driver's side window. My breath caught in my throat. A face stared back at me, but it wasn't human. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tight over a skull that seemed wrong, like the bones had been arranged by someone who didn't quite understand human anatomy. The eyes, black, deep, endless, locked onto mine, unblinking. Its mouth curled into something that almost resembled a grin, but it was too wide, too unnatural. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Then the face vanished. Not step back, not move away, just gone. I whipped my head around, scanning the darkness outside, my own reflection staring back at me in the glass. The yard was empty. The street was deserted. But I knew, asterisk, asterisk, I knew asterisk, asterisk. It was still out there, watching. I couldn't stay in the car. I had no choice. I had to go back inside. Every part of me screamed against it. But what else could I do? I couldn't sit here all night, waiting for the thing to come back. And I sure as hell wasn't going to wander around in the dark, alone, with whatever that was lurking nearby. My legs felt like lead as I forced myself out of the car. The air was deathly silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, not even the distant hum of cars from the main road. I hurried toward the front door, my pulse slamming against my ribs. The house loomed in front of me, its windows dark, hollow, like watching eyes. I hesitated. I didn't want to go back in, but I had to. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was heavier, thicker, pressing around me like an unseen force. My skin prickled, the fine hairs on my arms standing on end. I reached for the light switch. Nothing. The power was out. Of course it was. My phone was dead. My car wouldn't start. And now the lights. It was as if the house knew. I swallowed hard, forcing myself forward. The stairs loomed in front of me, disappearing into the darkness above. I didn't want to go up there, but I had no choice. My bag, my wallet, everything I needed was still in my bedroom. I took a deep breath and started up the steps. Each creak beneath my feet echoed too loudly in the silence. The air grew colder the higher I climbed. I reached the landing. My room was just down the hall. If I could just grab my things, I'd leave. I'd run if I had to. I stepped toward the bedroom door. Then I stopped. The closet door at the end of the hall was open again. No, wide open. And something was standing inside it. Not fully visible. Just a shape, a shadow, a presence. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then it stepped out, slowly, deliberately, revealing itself in the dim light from a window. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Its limbs were long and distorted, its fingers stretching too far, its head tilting unnaturally as if observing me. And then it moved, not walked, not ran, moved. One moment it was in the closet. The next, it was inches from my face. The breath left my lungs in a silent gasp. It loomed over me, its face inches from mine, those black, endless eyes staring into me, through me, into the deepest, most primal part of me that knew this thing was not this world. A whisper slithered through the darkness. You shouldn't be here. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to close in, the darkness swelling, consuming. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I turned and bolted down the stairs, my legs barely keeping up with the sheer force of my terror. I didn't stop. Not until I was out the front door. Not until I was running down the street, away from that house, away from the thing inside it. I didn't stop until I reached the gas station at the edge of town, breathless, shaking, barely able to speak as I collapsed against the counter and told the attendant, "I need a phone. Now." The gas station was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights humming softly, flickering just enough to make my nerves tighten even more. The attendant, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a scruffy beard, gave me a wary look as I leaned against the counter, panting, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold on to the phone he handed me. "You all right?" he asked, his voice slow, cautious, like he wasn't sure if I was drunk, high, or just crazy. I wasn't sure either. I fumbled with the phone, my fingers cold and clumsy as I tried to dial. My mind was racing, my thoughts tangled in a web of fear and disbelief. Who was I even calling? The police? What the hell was I going to tell them? "Hi, I think my house is haunted, and a thing with no face just tried to eat my soul." They'd locked me up, but I couldn't go back there. Not now, not ever. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I forced my breath to steady. Then, a click, silence, no greeting, no voice, just breathing, slow, shallow, and then beneath it, something else, a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "You shouldn't have left." I dropped the phone. It hit the counter with a sharp clatter, and I stumbled back, my breath ragged, my entire body numb with cold terror. The attendant frowned, picking up the receiver. "Hello." Silence. He shook his head, gave me a skeptical glance, and hung up. There was nobody there, man. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my mind reeling. I heard it. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my mind. Was I? "Listen," the guy said, his voice softened now, less wary, more concerned. "You sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed. It was a short, sharp, broken sound. If only he knew. I rubbed a shaking hand over my face, trying to steady myself. I think something's wrong with my house." The words felt stupid the moment they left my mouth, but I didn't know how else to explain it. The guy's expression shifted slightly, something flickering behind his eyes. Recognition. "You live in that old place off Briar Road, don't you?" My breath caught. I nodded slowly. He exhaled, shaking his head. "Man, you should have asked around before moving in there." A cold weight settled in my chest. "Why?" He glanced around the empty store, as if making sure no one else was listening, then leaned in slightly. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "That house, it's bad news. Always has been. People don't stay there long. Most don't even last a month." I swallowed hard. "Why?" He hesitated. Then, "Because something's in there." The word sent a bolt of ice down my spine. I wanted to deny it, wanted to laugh it off. tell him it was ridiculous. But after what I'd seen, what I'd heard, I knew he was right. I licked my lips, my mouth dry as sandpaper. What happened to the last person who lived there? His face darkened. Which one? A chill slithered down my back. There were more than one? He nodded. First guy who lived there after the house sat empty for a while. He left in the middle of the night. No moving truck, no goodbye. Just gone. The landlord found the place trashed, doors broken, furniture overturned, like he left in a hurry. My stomach twisted. The gas station guy continued. Then there was the woman. She was there maybe 3 weeks before she started telling people she wasn't alone in the house. Said she kept waking up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Thought someone was breaking in. She set up cameras. I leaned forward, and he hesitated. Then he said, low and grim, she caught something, but it wasn't a person. My blood turned to ice. What was it? I whispered. He shook his head. Nobody knows. She never showed anyone. Just packed up her things and left. Last I heard, she moved halfway across the country and refused to talk about it. The store felt colder suddenly. The hum of the lights seemed louder. I shivered. How long have you been there? He asked. I hesitated. 3 weeks. His face paled. Then you need to get out, he said, his voice urgent. Now. My pulse pounded. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something told me it wasn't going to let me leave. I turned back to the door, my gaze flicking toward the dark street outside. My car was still parked where I left it. Silent, still, waiting. Something about it felt wrong. Like I wasn't alone anymore. Like something had followed me here. And then a shadow moved. Not in the street. Not outside. Behind me. Inside the store. I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribs. But there was nothing there. The gas station guy frowned. You all right? I didn't answer. Because I knew. I could feel it. Something was here. Something that had come from that house. And it wasn't done with me yet. The air inside the gas station felt heavier now. Like the walls were pressing in. Like something unseen was curling itself around me. Waiting. I swallowed the rising panic, forcing myself to stay calm. The attendant was still watching me. Concern etched into his weathered face. You look like you just saw a ghost, he said again, but his voice wasn't playful this time. It was serious. I didn't know what to say. How did I explain that I had seen something worse than a ghost? That something had followed me, clinging to me like a shadow, waiting for the right moment to pull me back into its grasp? I turned back toward the glass doors. My car sat under the flickering station lights, an island of familiarity in the creeping darkness of the night. But something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't mine anymore, like I wasn't alone anymore. I took a slow step forward. The door slid open with a mechanical hiss. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp, burning my lungs. Something shifted in the reflection of the glass. A figure, tall, wrong, standing just behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just the attendant, frowning at me from behind the counter. But I had seen it. I knew I had. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. I needed to leave. I needed to get away from this place, from this night, from whatever was crawling after me from the shadows of that house. I forced my legs to move, each step slow and deliberate, like I was walking through deep water. My car key dug into my palm, clenched so tight my fingers ached. I reached the driver's side door, glancing through the window. The breath caught in my throat, the rear view mirror. There was something in the back seat, a shape barely visible in the dim glow of the gas station lights. Dark, still, watching. My first instinct was to run, but my body wouldn't move. I knew if I turned my back, if I gave it a single second to reach for me, it would be over. I had to look. Slowly, I reached for the door handle, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The metal was freezing under my fingers. I yanked the door open. Nothing. The back seat was empty, but the air inside the car felt wrong. Heavy, like someone had just been sitting there, watching me. My hands shook as I slid behind the wheel, slamming the door shut and locking it. The gas station's lights cast long, eerie shadows across the dashboard. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady my breathing. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe it was getting inside my head, twisting reality, making me doubt what was real. I gripped the steering wheel. I just needed to drive. Get as far from that house as possible. I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. And then, a whisper, not from outside, not from my mind, from the back seat, soft, amused. You can't leave. Cold breath against my neck. I screamed. I slammed the car into drive, tires screeching as I tore out of the lot. My hands were slick with sweat, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath came in ragged gasps, my chest tightening like a vice. The whisper still echoed in my ears. You can't leave. You can't leave. I had to leave. I was speeding, the road stretching into darkness, my headlights cutting through the night like desperate hands grasping for safety. The town blurred past, empty and silent, houses dark, streets abandoned. And then I saw it, the sign, Briar Road. My stomach twisted. No, I had been driving straight, away from town. I had not turned around. But there it was, that street, that house, waiting for me, like it had been expecting me all along, like I had never really left. I hit the brakes so hard the car skidded, tires screeching against pavement. My breath hitched, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't possible. My shaking hands fumbled for my phone. I needed help. Anyone. The gas station attendant. The police. Someone who could tell me this wasn't real. No signal. Of course. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, my throat tightening with frustration, terror. And then, a knock on the window. Slow. Deliberate. I froze. The glass beside me fogged, as if something was breathing against it. I turned my head. A face stared back at me. Not mine. Not human. Its skin was stretched too tight. Its eyes black pits of nothingness. Its mouth just a gaping hole, wide and grinning. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. It lifted a hand. Pressed a single skeletal finger to its lips. Sure. And then, the door unlocked. The sound of the door unlocking sent a bolt of terror through me. I hadn't touched it. My hands were still gripping the wheel, so tightly my fingers felt numb. But I heard it. The soft, unmistakable click of the lock releasing. The thing outside didn't move. It just stood there, face pressed against a window, grinning, waiting. I knew if I sat there a second longer, it would open the door. I couldn't let that happen. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps as I forced my hand to move, to slam the lock back down, to grip the handle and yank it shut so hard I thought the glass might shatter. My other hand scrambled for the gear shift. Drive. I needed to get away. But as I shoved the car forward, tires squealing against the pavement, I felt it. A weight in the back seat. Not the subtle shift of an object rolling. Something sitting down. My entire body went rigid. I didn't look. I couldn't. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, breathing through my teeth, knuckles white on the wheel. Drive. Just drive. Don't think. Don't stop. But the air inside the car had changed. It felt wrong. Thick. Heavy. Like I was suddenly breathing through water. Like something else was breathing with me, just behind my ear. I pressed the gas pedal harder, the speedometer climbing. Trees blurred past on either side of the road. I risked a glance in the rear-view mirror. For a split second, I thought it was empty, but then, the grin. A pale face grinning at me from the shadows of the back seat. Too wide, teeth too white, eyes too deep and hollow. My stomach lurched. My vision blurred with panic. It was inside. I swerved. The car lurched to the side of the road, tires skidding over gravel. My fingers fumbled for the door handle, shaking so violently I could barely grip it. But as I tried to throw the door open, a voice, right behind me, soft, teasing, asterisk, don't, asterisk. I felt the breath on my neck, and then something cold brushed my shoulder. I lost it. I yanked the door open, half stumbling, half falling onto the road. The car was still rolling, but I didn't care. I scrambled backward, hands and knees scraping against the rough asphalt, chest heaving, my whole body screaming to run. But then, the car stopped. On its own, the brake lights flared red against the darkness. The driver's side door swung open. And then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching me. I couldn't see what was stepping out of the car. I didn't want to see, but I could hear it. That awful, deliberate drag of something stepping toward me, like bare feet against pavement, like it was taking its time. I turned and ran. My legs burned. My lungs felt like they were about to explode, but I didn't stop. Not when I heard the footsteps behind me. Not when I heard the soft, amused whisper, asterisk, you can't leave, asterisk. Not when the air around me grew ice cold. The shadows stretching toward me like grasping hands. The town was ahead. The gas station. Houses. Lights. Safety. I pushed harder, my muscles screaming. My heart beat a hammer against my ribs. I wasn't fast enough. The thing was right behind me. I felt it. Its presence. Its breath. Its fingers reaching. I hit the pavement hard. For a second, my vision went black, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't on the road anymore. I was inside, back in the house. The front door stood open, revealing the empty, yawning darkness of the hallway. No, this wasn't real. I had left. I had escaped. But I was standing on the threshold, my back to the open door, my hands cold, my breath visible in the freezing air, like I had never left at all. And then the door creaked, slowly, softly, closing behind me. A whisper brushed against my ear, so close it sent a shudder down my spine. Asterisk, welcome home. Asterisk, I couldn't breathe. My whole body felt locked in place, frozen in terror. As the door clicked shut behind me, the air inside the house was thick, pressing in on me from all sides. No, this wasn't possible. I had left. I had escaped. But here I was, back inside. The silence was suffocating, stretching into every corner of the house. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway ahead. I backed up against the door, my fingers scrambling for the handle. But the second I touched it, asterisk ice star, a deep, piercing cold shot through my palm, like I had grabbed something buried in snow. I jerked my hand away, gasping in pain, and in the dim light, I saw it, black frost creeping across the wood, spreading in delicate veins like spiderweb cracks. The air around me dropped to freezing. My breath curled in front of me in soft white clouds. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, asterisk, you can't leave, asterisk, the whisper slithered through the darkness, crawling into my ears like something alive. I turned slowly. The hallway stretched out in front of me, impossibly long, longer than it had ever been before. At the end of it, just barely visible in the dim light, asterisk a figure star, tall, still, watching. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was grinning. It always grinned. I took a step back, but the floorboards beneath me groaned like something was breathing beneath them. The walls felt closer, tighter, suffocating. The figure didn't move, but the whisper did. Right behind me, asterisk, you shouldn't have come back. Asterisk, I spun, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing, but I wasn't alone. I could feel it. The air around me felt wrong, thick with something unseen, something waiting. I had to move. I forced my legs to work, stumbling forward into the hallway. The shadows shifted. I swore I saw them reaching for me, stretching long and thin across the floor. The figure at the end of the hall didn't move, but the closer I got, the more the air felt like I was wading through water. Each step was heavier, harder, like something was trying to pull me back. The walls around me warped, bending inward like a tunnel. I could hear something whispering in the cracks, something laughing. I reached the end of the hallway. The door in front of me was different. It was old, ancient looking. It was splintered and blackened like it had been burned. This door had never been here before, but I knew what it was. The thing in this house. The presence that haunted every corner. It had come from behind this door, and it wanted me to open it. Go on, the whisper urged. Asterisk, look inside. Asterisk. My hands trembled. I didn't want to. I knew what waited on the other side, but the floor behind me creaked. Something was coming. I had no choice. I reached out. The second my fingers touched the handle, the whisper turned into a scream. A blast of freezing air shot through the hallway, slamming into me like a hurricane. The door flung open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness. A void, deep, endless. Something moved inside it. Not just one thing. Many things. Crawling, shifting, waiting. Hands, faces, grins. A sea of them. And at the center of it all, it. The thing that had been watching me since I moved in. The thing that had followed me. Its grin was wider than ever. And as I stumbled backward, trying to escape, it reached for me. Cold fingers brushed my wrist. And everything went black. I woke up in darkness. Not the comfortable kind of darkness you find in your bedroom at night, but something heavier, something deeper. It was a kind of blackness that felt alive, pressing against my skin like unseen hands, wrapping around me like a burial shroud. I couldn't move. For a long moment, I wasn't even sure if I was awake. The air was thick with the scent of old wood, damp earth, and something else, something metallic, something wrong. Then the whispers began. Not one voice. Many. They slithered through the air like smoke, curling into my ears, speaking words I didn't understand but somehow felt. Asterisk, he's awake. Asterisk, asterisk, he sees now. Asterisk, asterisk, he belongs to the house. Asterisk. Panic surged through me, and I forced myself to move. My hands pressed against the floor, rough, splintered wood. I pushed up, my arms shaking, and the moment I sat up, I realized something was watching me. Not just one thing. Hundreds of them. I couldn't see them in the dark, but I could feel them, standing just out of reach, watching, grinning. My breath came in shallow gasps as my fingers fumbled across the floor. Where was I? How had I gotten here? The last thing I remembered was the door. The door at the end of the impossible hallway. The door I should have never opened. And now I was here, wherever here was. A soft sound echoed through the darkness. Asterisk tap, 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 asterisk, like fingernails against wood. Closer, asterisk tap, 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 asterisk, shaking. I reached into my pocket, praying my phone was still there. My fingers found it, and I pulled it out, pressing the power button. Nothing. Dead. My stomach twisted. Then light, not from my phone, from the darkness itself. Pale, sickly light seeped in, revealing the room around me. The walls were covered in scratches. Deep, jagged lines, carved by desperate hands. There were words among the scratches. Don't look at them. They are always smiling. There is no way out. Run. The last word sent a shiver through me, because it wasn't scratched into wood like the others. It was fresh, carved deep, still dripping red. My stomach lurched. Then the air shifted. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. The whispers grew louder. Asterisk, he's awake. Asterisk, asterisk, he's awake. Asterisk, asterisk, he's awake. Asterisk. I turned. They were there, standing in the doorway. Pale figures, their faces stretched into wide, impossible grins. Their eyes were black voids, empty and endless. They stood still, but their grins twitched, like they were trying to get even wider. Then, all at once, they rushed me. I scrambled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. But before I could move, cold hands grabbed my arms, my legs, my throat. The world tilted, and suddenly, I wasn't in the room anymore. I was in the house, but it wasn't the same. Everything was wrong. The walls pulsed like they were breathing. The floor stretched and twisted beneath my feet. And the whispers, they were everywhere. I turned a corner, desperate to find a way out, and that's when I saw it. The mirror, tall, old, standing in the middle of the hallway. And in the reflection, I wasn't alone. The grinning figure stood behind me, Their mouths stretched wide, and my own reflection was smiling too. I stumbled back, shaking my head. No, this wasn't real. But the reflection didn't move with me. It stayed still, grinning. Then, without warning, it spoke. Asterisk, you were never supposed to leave. Asterisk, a hand. Asterisk, asterisk, my asterisk, asterisk hand. Reached out of the mirror, and before I could run, before I could scream, it grabbed me and pulled me inside.